What happens when the life you are building suddenly becomes bigger than you imagined? What happens when love becomes responsibility? When motherhood meets public pressure? When private exhaustion has to stand beside public expectation? And what if becoming is not only about finding your voice, but learning how to protect your heart while the whole world is watching? Welcome back to this audiobook insights series on Becoming by Michelle Obama. In part 1, we explored Michelle's early years, her family, discipline, identity, ambition, and the foundation that shaped her. In part 2, we stepped into love, marriage, calling, partnership, and the challenge of building an us without losing the me. Now in part 3, the story deepens again. Because this is where life becomes heavier. The stakes get higher, the pressure gets louder, the family grows, the spotlight intensifies. And Michelle Obama must learn what it means to carry many roles at once: wife, mother, professional, supporter, protector, and eventually, a woman thrust into a level of visibility she never actually chased. This part of Becoming is powerful, because it shows that growth is not always glamorous. Sometimes becoming happens while you are tired. Sometimes it happens while you are frustrated. Sometimes it happens while you are trying to hold a family together in the middle of a storm of expectations. So let us begin there, with motherhood. There are seasons in life where the questions change. Before motherhood, Michelle had already asked, "Who am I? What do I want? What kind of work matters? What kind of partnership do I want to build?" But once children enter the picture, the questions shift. How do I protect them? How do I be present? How do I build a stable home? How do I care for others without disappearing myself? Motherhood, in Michelle Obama's story, is not presented as a sentimental label. It is a real and demanding transformation. Her daughters become central to the shape of her life, her energy, her decisions, and her emotional world. This is one of the most relatable parts of the book, because so many women know what it means to love deeply and carry heavily at the same time. To hold children in one arm and responsibility in the other. To care for family while also navigating marriage, work, time, exhaustion, expectations, and personal identity. Michelle lets us see that motherhood is beautiful, yes, but also restructuring. It changes routines. It changes sleep. It changes emotional bandwidth. It changes the way time feels. It changes what success even means on a given day. And that is a vital truth. Because the world often celebrates visible achievement while quietly overlooking the invisible labor that holds a family together. The planning, the noticing, the nurturing, the organizing, the remembering, the emotional steadiness. Michelle's voice honors that invisible labor. She does not treat caregiving as small. She reveals it as foundational. For many listeners, this chapter will feel deeply personal, especially those who have ever tried to build a meaningful life while raising children in an environment that keeps demanding more. Michelle's challenge is not only that she is a mother, it is that she is a mother married to a man whose path is becoming increasingly public, demanding, and disruptive to normal family rhythm. And this creates a tension that runs through much of part 3. How do you build a home when the world keeps pulling on your family? That tension becomes even sharper as Barack's political career accelerates. Because with public life comes absence. And with absence comes strain. One of the most honest elements in Becoming is that Michelle does not pretend political ambition is easy on a marriage or on a family. She shows the cost. Barack's calling is expanding. His work is becoming more consuming. His public role is becoming more significant. And Michelle, while intelligent enough to understand the meaning of that work, is also grounded enough to feel its impact in daily life. This is important because many people admire purpose from a distance, but the people living closest to it often feel the sacrifice most sharply. Late nights, missed time, increased pressure. Less predictability, more emotional weight, more public exposure, more private strain. Michelle's story gives dignity to that tension. She does not reduce herself to the supportive wife in some flat and one-dimensional sense. She remains thoughtful, honest, and emotionally awake. She sees both the value of Barack's path and the strain it places on family life. That complexity is what makes her memoir so credible. She can love someone and still be frustrated. She can believe in purpose and still question the cost. She can support the mission and still insist that family matters. This is mature love. Not blind admiration, not silent resentment, but truth with commitment. There is a strong lesson here for every listener. A meaningful life still needs honest conversation. Too many people think love means never naming the hard thing. But Michelle's story suggests the opposite. Real partnership means naming what is real. Naming the imbalance, naming the fatigue, naming the disappointment, naming the practical realities behind beautiful ideals. Because unspoken strain does not disappear, it deepens. Michelle's honesty becomes one of the stabilizing forces in the marriage. She helps keep lofty purpose connected to actual life. She insists that values must show up not only in speeches and service, but at home, in presence, in parenting, in responsibility. That is not resistance to greatness. That is one of the things that protects it. And still, the pressure does not lessen. It grows, because what begins as political involvement slowly moves towards something far bigger than either of them could carry lightly. The presidency. And with that possibility comes a new level of disruption. One of the most striking things in Michelle Obama's story is that she is not intoxicated by political glamour. She does not chase the spotlight. She does not seem drawn to power for power's sake. She is not seduced by the theater of public life. That makes her perspective especially compelling. Because when the possibility of Barack running for president becomes real, Michelle does not respond like someone enchanted by the prestige of history. She responds like a wife, a mother, and a grounded human being asking the most practical and important questions. What will this do to our family? What will this demand from our daughters? What will happen to our privacy? What kind of pressure will we be inviting into our home? These are wise questions, and they reveal something powerful about becoming. Not every major opportunity feels immediately exciting. Some feel costly before they feel meaningful. Michelle's hesitation shows emotional intelligence. She understands that some dreams are so large they do not just change schedules. They change identity, rhythm, exposure, safety, and the atmosphere of family life. This is a deeply relevant lesson because sometimes people assume hesitation means lack of faith. But often, hesitation is simply the soul measuring weight. Michelle measures the weight. She knows what campaigns demand. She knows how much political life takes. She knows what it means for Barack to belong less and less only to the family and more to the public. And like many women holding families together, she has to consider not just what is inspiring, but what is sustainable. Yet in the middle of this reluctance, a deeper truth begins to surface. Michelle is not merely being dragged along by history, she is being shaped by it. She will not enter this next chapter as a passive figure. She will have to find her own voice within it. That is one of the major transformations of Part 3. Michelle begins to move from reluctant participant toward more conscious public presence. Not because she suddenly loves politics in some simple way, but because she recognizes that if this journey is happening, she must decide how she herself will show up inside it. This is an important life lesson. We do not always choose every circumstance that enlarges our lives, but we do choose the spirit with which we enter it. Michelle cannot fully control the size of the storm, but she can shape the kind of woman she will be within it. And that is where becoming becomes courage. The campaign years bring a new kind of pressure, visibility. Not ordinary visibility. Not the visibility of a local platform, but the intense, national, often distorted visibility that comes when your life becomes a public story people think they understand. Michelle Obama is scrutinized, interpreted, misinterpreted, judged, reduced, discussed, watched. This is one of the hardest realities of public life. The world often turns human beings into symbols before it allows them to remain people. Michelle feels this. The things she says are weighed. The way she speaks is analyzed. The way she looks is discussed. Her identity is filtered through assumptions, projections, and cultural bias. This is painful, and becoming allows us to feel that, because being seen is not always the same as being known. In fact, sometimes the more public you become, the easier it is for people to see an image and miss the person. Michelle has to learn how to withstand that, how to remain grounded when narratives are being built around her, how to stay dignified without becoming frozen, how to speak with care without becoming fake, how to protect her inner life when the outer world keeps commenting on it. This is a massive part of becoming, not just learning to stand on a stage, but learning not to lose your center because of the crowd. Many listeners may not face national scrutiny, but the emotional principle still applies. People misunderstand us. People flatten our complexity. People judge one moment as if it explains our whole life. People speak confidently about stories they do not fully know. Michelle's story teaches us not to build identity from public reaction, because applause is unstable. Criticism is unstable. Perception is unstable. What must remain stable is your core. Her grounding comes from what shaped her long before the campaign. Family, values, work ethic, honesty, care for her daughters. A strong understanding of who she is and where she comes from. This is why beginnings matter. Because when pressure comes, we do not invent our core in the moment. We draw from what has already been built within us. Michelle also learns the discipline of intentional self-presentation. She cannot afford to be careless, but she also cannot afford to become so managed that she ceases to be real. So she begins developing a public voice that is still her own, warm, direct, intelligent, relatable, and rooted in lived experience. That is a significant transformation. She is no longer only reacting to the role. She is growing into it. And still, under all of it, she remains what she has been all along, a protector of family. If this audiobook insight is speaking to you, subscribe to Success Resources Books Insights and share this with someone who is navigating a season of pressure, visibility, family responsibility, or personal growth. Because some books do not merely inspire us, they strengthen us. They remind us that becoming is not neat, but it can still be meaningful. Now let us continue. One of Michelle Obama's strongest instincts throughout becoming is her desire to protect her daughters. This instinct runs deep. No matter how large the campaign becomes, no matter how historic the moment, no matter how much public excitement surrounds their family, Michelle continues to think like a mother. She understands that children need grounding, consistency, and emotional safety, especially when adult life around them is becoming extraordinary. This is one of the most powerful contrasts in the memoir. The world sees headlines. She sees bedtime. The world sees history. She sees homework. The world sees symbolism. She sees two girls who still need normalcy, boundaries, routines, and love. That perspective is deeply moving because it shows us what real leadership looks like in private life. Not just standing in public purpose, but also guarding what is precious at home. Michelle's commitment to normalcy becomes a kind of resistance. She refuses to let public life swallow childhood completely. She works to preserve structure, values, and ordinary family rituals, even as circumstances become increasingly extraordinary. That instinct carries a lesson for all of us. As life gets bigger, we must protect what keeps us human. For some people, that means family dinners. For others, it means prayer. For others, it means routines, rest, trusted friends, health, or boundaries. Without that protection, large purpose can begin to devour inner life. Michelle knows this, and she fights against it. This does not mean everything is easy. Far from it. It means she is intentional. She understands that children do not automatically absorb stability simply because adults are trying hard. Stability must be created, repeated, protected, modeled, and perhaps that is one of the deepest truths in this part of becoming. Love is not only tenderness. Love is architecture. It builds patterns. It creates safety. It makes room for growth. It protects innocence where it can. Michelle is not merely surviving public life. She is trying to mother well inside it. That is extraordinary. And as the campaign grows more intense, another transformation takes place. Michelle herself begins stepping more fully into her public role, not as an echo of Barack, but as a voice people respond to in her own right. At first, Michelle Obama is often framed in relation to her husband, Barack's wife, the candidate's spouse, a supporting figure in a larger political narrative. But slowly, something powerful happens. People begin to hear her. Not just see her, hear her. And what they hear is strength, warmth, intelligence, humor, and truth. They hear someone who speaks not like a polished machine, but like a real person. Someone who understands family, work, struggle, sacrifice, and the complexity of ordinary American life. This is such an important stage in her becoming, because part of growth is moving from supporting the story to inhabiting your own place within it. Michelle does not become powerful by imitating someone else's style. She becomes powerful by speaking from who she actually is. Her credibility comes from authenticity. Her resonance comes from lived reality. This matters for every leader and communicator. Your voice becomes strongest not when it sounds impressive, but when it sounds true. Michelle connects because she does not speak down to people. She speaks from experience. She speaks as a daughter, wife, mother, professional, and woman who has wrestled with ambition, identity, disappointment, and responsibility. That is what gives her voice range. She can talk about values without sounding abstract. She can talk about family without sounding superficial. She can talk about hope without sounding detached from struggle. Her voice grows because it is rooted, and rooted voices last. This chapter gives listeners a profound reminder. Do not underestimate the power of your own voice simply because your life is currently standing beside someone else's spotlight. Michelle Obama's story shows that there may come a moment when what you have lived, what you have learned, and who you have become turns into a message people deeply need. But that only happens when you stay connected to yourself. She does. And because she does, the woman once cautious about political life begins to emerge not as a background figure, but as a defining presence in the story. Still, beneath all the public movement, the emotional reality remains intense. Pressure, fatigue, exposure, responsibility. And that brings us to one of the most important themes of Part 3. How do you keep going when the season asks more from you than you thought you had to give? One of the most human lessons in becoming is that strong people still get tired. Michelle Obama's story does not portray strength as effortless poise. It shows strength as endurance with honesty. She keeps showing up, but not because the season is easy. She keeps showing up because the season is important. This is a lesson many people need. We often imagine strength as emotional smoothness. But real strength often looks like carrying complexity without collapsing into it. Michelle is balancing family, marriage, public expectation, campaigning, scrutiny, and the emotional labor of being not just present, but composed inside a relentless season. That is not light work. That is heavy work. And yet she continues. Not perfectly, not without tension, but faithfully. That is a more useful picture of resilience than many people have. Resilience is not pretending you feel nothing. It is refusing to let pressure erase your values. Michelle's resilience is anchored in love for her family, commitment to what matters, and an inner formation built long before this season arrived. She draws on discipline, on memory, on identity, on faith in something larger than comfort. This is why Part 3 feels so powerful. It is not just about politics, it is about inner stamina. And inner stamina matters in every sphere of life. In leadership, in marriage, in parenting, in business, in ministry, in caregiving, in long seasons of uncertainty. Michelle's life tells us that becoming more sometimes means carrying more. But it also means learning what must hold steady while life grows heavier. And what must hold steady? Your values, your center, your love, your truth, your ability to remember who you are beneath the role. That is what allows Michelle to keep moving through a chapter that could easily have swallowed her whole. Instead, it shapes her. And that is the closing lesson of Part 3. As we close this third part of Becoming, Michelle Obama's journey offers several powerful lessons. First, motherhood and family responsibility are not side stories. They are part of the real architecture of a meaningful life. Second, public purpose often carries private cost, and wise people count that cost honestly. Third, reluctance is not always weakness. Sometimes it is wisdom pausing long enough to understand the weight of a decision. Fourth, visibility is not the same as being known. So do not build your identity on public opinion. Fifth, protecting what matters most becomes even more important as life gets bigger. And finally, strength is not the absence of weariness. Strength is staying true while carrying more than you thought you could. Michelle Obama, in this season, is becoming more than a wife beside a candidate. She is becoming a force in her own right, a woman whose voice, values, emotional honesty, and grounded presence will eventually matter to millions. But that does not happen by accident. It happens because she keeps choosing truth over image, family over performance, substance over show, identity over noise. That is Becoming. And in Part 4, we step into the chapter where everything changes again. The White House, the role of First Lady, the demands of history, the discipline of influence, the meaning of legacy, and the deeper question beneath it all. After all the titles, all the expectations, all the pressure, and all the applause, what does it actually mean to keep becoming? Stay with us for Part 4 of Becoming here on Success Resources Books Insights. Because the final stage of this journey is not only about public legacy, it is about service, identity, and the lasting work of becoming fully yourself in a world eager to define you too quickly. This is Becoming, narrated by SR Books Insights. This is more than mindset, it's a mission. Keep seeking, keep growing, keep giving. And together, let's make the world rich again.